Alpesh Patel is here this morning, CEO of Perfinium Partners. Good morning, Alpesh.
Morning, Alpesh.
Morning. Morning.
Okay, I've almost run out of questions, so I'll just say Greece, go.
You know, we need to be thanking the Greeks and the Germans. You know, the story here is that the Germans are holding firm. I tell you why the Germans need to be thanking the Greeks. And it's an argument the Greeks haven't made. The euro has pretty much collapsed thanks to the Greek crisis.
It's not collapsed.
It's fallen incredibly sharply. I think it's at about a 10-year low. I mean, it's a pretty 10-year low. We can argue about the definition of collapse. It's fallen sharply.
Yes, that's better.
Over a prolonged period of time to the point of making German exports cheaper than they've been for a decade. The German stock market is at an all-time high. It has risen almost 100% over the last 5 years, since the Greek crisis began. And if you look at how much that means wealth has been added to those companies, it's about $4 trillion. That is about 10 times the total amount of Greek debt. Even if the Greeks were only responsible through the euro falling and making German exports cheaper for just 1/10 of that rise in the value of German stocks, they've repaid, never mind the Germans, they've repaid the whole of Europe of all their money.
But others may suddenly counter that argument with the point that if Greece was to leave the Eurozone or have some sort of financial meltdown or default on its debts, German taxpayers would be paying for that to a great degree because of the amount that Germany has lent, put in the pot. It's something like 2-point-something% of German GDP.
Yeah, they're not getting it back. What do they want to do? They're not getting it back.
So
the Greeks won't pay. They're squatting. They won't go. Well, they won't pay. They won't pay. They won't leave. It doesn't, because they've already been repaid, and the wealth that's been created by the rise in their stock market. And if you look at the bumper tax take that the German authorities are going to get, because German companies are making more profits than they've ever done before in their entire history, thanks to the euro depreciating, thanks to the Greeks, they've made back in tax all that they think that they've lost. And it's not the taxpayer will be paying it back in Germany anyway. It'll be future generations in about 100 years in Germany, because it's all borrowed on the international bond market. So actually the Germans don't suffer at all. It's just the perception that they do.
But also at the same time, I remember I've interviewed him several times, the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Germany, who's very supportive, incidentally, of Greece, and they're putting out the line that they want Greece to stay within the Eurozone, but at the same time arguing all this time spent on sorting out Greece on the part of Angela Merkel and the other politicians in Berlin has meant their eyes have been off the issues in Germany, the issues that they want to see sorted out to help German businesses.
Which just goes to prove the point, when the politicians are not focused on politics, doesn't the economy do incredibly well? You know, I think that distracts. You should keep politicians distracted on other things far more regularly. It's not damaged the German economy at all, is my point. They've got greater growth than they otherwise would have done were it not for the euro depreciating, basically falling, collapsing, call it what you will, thanks to the Greeks. They've done a huge favour to the whole of Europe. And it's not just Germany. It's the European stocks that are at an all-time high. And it's no coincidence, it's because the euro has become cheaper and we can export more cheaply, compete better with the rest of the world as a result. Nobody's giving the Greeks, nobody's done the calculation to say, actually, have they actually already paid us back thanks to this? Perversely, ironically, they actually have. But
so, okay, if you were to give that, sorry, Adnan, if you were to give that argument to Alexis Tsipras, so can he then argue, okay, come on, write off our debts?
I tell you what,
we've paid you back over and over again.
I tell you what, and it links to the second story, which is the Greeks going to the Russians. That's a far more convincing argument for the Greeks to say that than to say, well, wait a minute, after the Second World War, Germans got bailouts. That's not convincing, and it's an affront to the Germans when the Greeks say that, because what the Germans would reply back to that is saying, wait a minute, we were trying to get our house in order, we were trying to be productive, we were trying to be Europe's largest economy and rebuild. The Greeks are not giving that impression to the rest of Europe. That's the bigger problem. It isn't the 380 billion euros outstanding. The bigger problem is, what are your plans to become a powerhouse? What are your plans not to keep asking for more social benefits, effectively, from the rest of Europe? Now, that's a more convincing argument than even saying, oh, we've been on the phone to the Russians. We don't buy that for a moment. We saw what the Russians were doing in Ukraine, and we know the Greeks are petrified of the Russians as lenders, creditors of any sort. Then the Greeks would be far better off making the arguments that I've made, than they would about trying to threaten the Germans or the rest of Europe with, oh, we're going to get in bed with Ivan. It's not going to happen.
Good. I'm glad you referred to that independent story because we can now move on to the Times. I think everybody remembers, certainly Londoners do, where they were when the bombings on 7/7 happened. And today is going to be a very emotional day for everybody in this city, probably for the whole country.
You're absolutely right. And as you said, everybody remembers. At that time, I was a governor at Luton University, and some of the terrorists who undertook these bombings were linked to our university. What we still haven't managed to do, sadly, in Britain, after 10 years of these kinds of terrorist threats, and thankfully there hasn't been an attack as big as this since, and that's all thanks to our security services. What we still haven't managed to do is to flood out these terrorists in our universities, in our places of worship, and I'll say the problem is in mosques. It's with Islamic terrorism. If it was in churches, we'd call that out, because the people who say, oh, well, you're just having a go at one particular religious group. No, if it was in churches, if it was the problem with Judaism or Hinduism, we'd call that out. We haven't managed to sort that problem out, even to this day, which is why the problem's festering, and we're still getting terrorists in Britain, born in Britain, who are still feeling that this society, all the great things it does for it, they still feel they want to blow the hell out of it. And we've got to remove them from all those social places and integrate them one way or another into broader society. There are too many in too small cliques being allowed to fester these evil thoughts.
Should we go on to the balloons?
Ah, OK.
China.
Yeah, OK.
Sorry.
You want to talk China?
You want to talk
balloons?
China rather than balloons?
Tell us what's happening in the Chinese stock market, because some people are saying the Communist Party
I just felt we had a lot of hot air in the studio at the moment.
And with China, OK, look, it's dropped. Now, $2.7 trillion have been wiped off. That is 6 times the Greek debt has been wiped off in the space of a few weeks with the Chinese stock market. So much for everybody saying, you know, wealth is being created in the East and money's moving to the East and everybody's moving to the East. Their market is collapsing. What, 25–30% down in just the space of 3 weeks. I've just come back from India, where company after company after company is saying they want to set up in Europe and they want to access the European markets despite this so-called Greek crisis. They want to set up in Europe. So, you know, it's a great counterbalance and reminder to the actual strength of Western economics.
Alpesh, thank you very much indeed. It's always a pleasure to hear your opinions.
Thank you.
Have a good day. And you too, have a good day. Or join us again to continue your good day in a few minutes.
See you soon. Bye-bye.